Hi, so this week was to draw on 3 experiences and make a video. So the first was questioning about standardized testing. I have experience, obviously, from when I was in school and in high school. I remember taking paper tests for the most part, and then in high school I do remember taking the tests on the computer. I remember especially like junior year of high school being very overwhelmed. Like they talked about the March Madness, because we also were taking our ACTs and other the standardized tests. I don't even remember which ones they were, what they were called back then. So what I'd like to draw on more are the experiences now that I have as a teacher. We are actually, it's kind of funny and ironic, but this week we are doing our MAPS NWA standardized testing. Last year we just did these at the end of the year, and so we didn't get to see like results. So this year we decided, okay, well, we want to take our students and we want to test them at the beginning of the year and see the growth that they have at the end of the year. It's gonna be, I think, a lot of more work for these students, but they might be able to remember more of what their scores were from now to what they were then, so they can see that, which I think is really good, because I don't think it's always just about the data that teachers get or that the school gets, because I think the students like to see that they have grown as well. One thing that I really noticed was a big difference was how much more mature my students got towards the end of the year, because having these tests at the beginning of this year as freshmen and getting them to sit still for as long as they had to was really tough, and I don't remember having that much having to need that much classroom management towards the end of the school year. So that was something that outside of the actual standardized testing, it was kind of cool to see. Experience number 2, we were looking at questions 2, 4, and 8. So number 2 is, how do you distinguish between grading and evaluation? I guess I say that grading informs students about the teacher's view on their progress, but I also think that students might see it as ranking, because they're seeing, well, I'm not doing as good as this person. I always get, worried when students see, okay, well, why did they get 10 out of 10 and I have 8 out of 10. I also have a hard time having other students grade, because I feel like they have that feeling in themselves of ranking. However, that also can motivate students. I see evaluation happening in my classroom most during discussions, and I think some students really excel in discussion over having a paper assignment, which I know there is a lot of data on that. So like especially like during comprehension, I like to do comprehension questions that are answered out loud. For those students, that they do better saying it out loud than answering it on a piece of paper. However, I do think that because of that, then participation grades are really important for those students that don't do so well on paper grading, that I can give them a small grade for participation when they are, they're maintaining that and they're doing better in that, maybe more so than the paper. Number 4, I remember formative and summative. So from when I was in school, especially in college, I would say that I had to do a lot of journal analyzing throughout the year. And then, of course, the formative, I could see that as the formative assessment. And then, of course, there were longer papers and many unit tests, which I would say were summative. Number 7, have you ever considered the evaluations of your school career as an assessment for learning rather than of learning? I guess I want to take a different perspective on this. From a teacher standpoint, as a teacher, I've been evaluated several times, and I feel that I get more out of their critiques, that I am able to use it and move forward with it. So that's where I guess I see something with like a perspective on assessment for learning rather than of my learning, because I'm learning from their evaluation, I guess. The third thing that we're supposed to review are the different tables. So table 1, I like the breakdown of the learning objectives. And then that they have corresponding Bloom verbs. I think that this is a really great tool because you kind of get to relate the two together. And then table 2, I actually have experience doing something like this for my formative assessment. I did this last year with a novel, The Child Called It. Like for example, to relate to the musical intelligence, the students could choose to make a playlist that the main character, Dave Peltzer, would have played during the time of his child abuse. And then another choice they had was that they had a choice to like reenact a scene from the book. So they had to think and put in their own version of their head. I didn't have too many students that chose to do that, but one that was super cool, and I think I will remember it for a long time, was that a student make a movie trailer. And this was so cool to see his strengths, because as a ninth grader, there aren't many ninth graders that know technology that well, that have a green screen at home and that can make a movie trailer. It was so cool, so interesting, and he grasped so many different parts of the book and put it into these different scenes to create this trailer. For the third table, the journal prompts and reading for 10-20 minutes, I do this quite frequently in my classroom. I think it's a really great learning tool. For example, we are just doing some nonfiction reading on comprehension and bias. And so I use some text sets from stuff about the Titanic. And I felt like we've been doing so much informative reading that after one day when we read, the next day to start off class, our bell ringer was a journal prompt where they had to pretend that they were on the ship that day, and that they could decide, did they die, did they live? And they had to use all their senses. I said, what do you hear? What do you see? What do you feel? And they really enjoyed it. So when they shared in their groups, the people that they sit next to, they were really intrigued with how the other person decided, okay, were they living? How did they live? And how did they die? And they had to use text evidence in that. So they knew that, okay, they'd be going to New York City if they did live, or if they didn't make it, how did they die? Did they freeze? And they had to use the evidence from text, which is part of our lesson learning. So I think I do that quite frequently, that learning objective. So that is all I have. Thanks.